All right. Now, I'm assuming everyone can see this fine. Valentina, feel free to chime in. I can't see any comments at this point, but chime in if people are not seeing it. Hello, everyone. As Valentina said, my name is Ryan Boyd, and I'm here today to talk about DevRel in a COVID world. So what does that mean? What makes developer relations through a pandemic different than developer relations normally? What's still the same? What challenges are we having and how are we addressing those? Much depends on how we define the role of developer relations. That definition is different in every organization. So for the purpose of this presentation, let's define it based on my philosophies and guidelines after having done developer relations for almost 15 years now at Google, Neo4j, and Databricks. Alrighty, so whoops, an interruption. Actually, as I was building these slides, my 4-year-old daughter came up and right as I started building the slides, wanted to type her name. And so her name is Kaya. But just a reminder for those of us in the COVID era with having kids climbing on top of us more often, and maybe my dog will join this as well, although she's asleep on the bed here. But developer relations, and my goal for developer relations, is about building and growing communities which scale. Scale is a major component of my developer relations philosophy. So let me give you that. Scaling through content, scaling through other groups in the company, scaling through the community. It's necessary as developer relations teams are often small and considered expensive within their orgs, especially when they're inside marketing teams. So DevRel requires scalability. This is one of my first principles of developer relations. And DevRel is about reaching new audiences by driving smoother and wider adoption, often through making products easier and more powerful. Now, let's talk about how developer relations happens in practice. It's really a loop. Developers become aware of a technology and its capabilities. They adopt that technology, they use it and realize the value enough, hopefully, that they want to advocate on behalf of that technology. And this is how you scale. This is how you make more developers aware of that technology through your community, who is super excited to share what they've been able to accomplish with it. Now, for those of us in the marketing world, whether you're reporting up to a marketing team or just interact with them a lot, this can actually be transformed into a funnel. I prefer the loop. That definitely works better for my mind. But in reality, it can also be represented like this. So you have developers coming in the top, and out the bottom, you come the handful of people who are excited enough about your technology to advocate on behalf of it. And then they push along some new people. This could make an interesting animation. They push along some new people into the top of the funnel. But while I talk about marketing, DevRel really requires credibility. This is another key principle I have for developer relations. This credibility is necessary because you need to really be engineers speaking to engineers or data scientists speaking to data scientists. Why is this important? Well, I don't really care what group you're in, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in product, whether you're in engineering or BD or even sales, as my first developer relations group was. You need to have credibility with both your internal and external audiences. The community needs to believe that you're an engineer that's going to take up the good fight on their behalf in the internal product teams. And the company needs to believe that you're going to get the word out about their products. Your engineering team needs to know that you're smart and capable of sharing best practices and helping triage bugs and feature requests. All of this is about credibility. Does your audience think you're credible, and does your company think you're credible? DevRel also typically requires a lot of adaptability. DevRel teams need to work with undefined jobs. Sometimes they're doing engineering work, sometimes marketing work, sometimes BD. on any given day, I could be writing code or writing blog posts or filming videos and maybe even cleaning up a bunch of dirty plates after a meetup. It really requires this level of adaptability. Products can be in different stages of the adoption lifecycle, which requires you to be adaptable in the volume level of advocacy. Sometimes you're very quietly helping to guide development of stealth projects, working with a handful of early users on the product. Like with Google Drive, I worked with 20 different companies for 6 months, and only those 20 companies, and nothing was public about the Google Drive API at the time. But then later in the life cycle of the product, you need to get on stage, on a big stage, and promote the products for wide adoption. So this requires a lot of natural adaptability. If you want to do the same thing every day, this profession is not for you. But if you really like that variety, DevRel is a great career path. So the next few slides are ones that I actually presented during the hiring process at Databricks when I was trying to describe who I wanted to bring on to the Databricks team. So do we hire expert engineers or expert communicators? Well, frankly, they need to be both. More importantly, though, we really want people with the right attitude and the ability to adapt to a changing environment. We want engineers with utmost empathy for the communities they represent, and we want people guided by data, but who understand that the data isn't always there to clearly guide. We want people who attacked every project with the skills that they have or the skills of the community or the skills that they can acquire through fast learning. There's no not in my job description in DevRel, in my opinion, because things constantly change. We want people who are comfortable approaching perfection while understanding that they may never reach it before the priorities end up shifting. So adaptability also means adaptability in how you reach developers most effectively. Do we reach them through our channels, through our own forums or social accounts or things like that? Do we reach them through their channels? And the idea of joining some other Slack for some other communities, or do we do we reach them through wider communities like Stack Overflow and other technologies like that that help us engage with the developers? Do we reach them one-to-one at conferences and meetups or from the stage there? Is the biggest barrier to adoption for our products simply sitting down and starting coding? If so, we might reach them through workshops, training classes, or hackathons. But what about online communities and content? How do we reach developers there? And importantly, if you think about the three types of three types of ways that a lot of developer teams or developer relations teams reach developers, they do it through these physical events, through conferences, through meetups, through workshops. I can't even count on my two hands the number of times I've had an executive say, well, you should be at more conferences, you should be at more events, you should be on the road traveling. We really want road warriors. And that's not really developer relations to me. To spend 30 to 40 weeks per year on the road traveling, being a road warrior is not how you get things done, in my opinion. There are a lot of problems with adaptability in that physical world. We can try to be the most adaptable team ever, but we're limited by our geography. So the Neo4j DevRel team, the last team that I was on before Databricks, we had people in 6 different cities, 4 of them in the US and 2 of them in Europe. The Databricks DevRel team has people in 4 different cities in the US and nowhere else. However, if you compare that with who's interested in our products, who's interested in our technologies, Well, our web visitors come from all over the world. It's dominated by the US and India, and there's very little activity from Greenland, Central Africa, and North Korea. But, otherwise, it's pretty much all over the world. So how do we adapt? How do we make sure that our team that is located in just a handful of cities in the US can be productive and reach the wider world? And reach those communities and help us serve those communities? Well, we can hop on a plane, of course. We all love sitting at 30,000 feet, breathing in recycled air from our fellow passengers, especially when that recycled air may be pandemic inducing. In simpler times, let's just take it to there. And there's still a lot of problems with that solution. There's still a lot of problems with just getting on a plane and flying all around the world. I don't think you're the best when you're flying, your best self when you're flying 30 to 40 weeks a year. Here's an example of some discussion between Josh Long and Arun Gupta. Josh is a well-known advocate on the Spring Project, talks about his challenges being an advocate a lot on his social media. He's a great man, but I really don't wish his life upon anyone. He's probably been in hospitals in more countries than you've visited in your entire life, and he makes sleeping in his own bed a rare event. So what's the real solution? Virtual, right? How do we empower our communities to share the message? How do we use technology to lessen our time in the air and lessen our CO2 impact upon the world? Well, with some virtual technology or virtual events or virtual what, right? So I'm going to get into these. You could sense I'm being a little bit cynical. I think that, virtual is something that is a new fad now that we've hit the pandemic, but it is something that I want to talk about how I've accidentally set our teams up for success by doing a lot of things that are very beneficial in the pandemic world where we can't get on a plane and travel. So what are virtual books? I don't know. The word virtual is popular, right? Though, what I mean here, though, is content, is focusing on scalable content. Our teams at Neo4j and our teams at Databricks have actually written quite a few books. This is a great way to take your knowledge and bring it out to the community. And it's especially a great way when that community isn't going around and traveling to conferences. You have to think about the credibility side, though, too. O'Reilly is a great brand. It brings credibility to our team. It brings credibility to the authors that we work with within our company. So in this case, this book was written by two folks in developer relations, and then two folks who are the co-creators of Apache Spark, or committers of Apache Spark project. And the O'Reilly brand is great at bringing that credibility. It also brings us mass distribution, which helps us have credibility within our teams that we work with every day, within the marketing team who wants leads. I don't purposely focus on leads myself. That's not the role of our developer relations team, but it helps to help out your colleagues. It builds you credibility with them when you go and ask them for things or looking for their help. And so, for instance, this book, we sponsored it, and as a result of sponsoring, we're able to distribute it for free on our website. A little bit word on the credibility angle here is that I do see a lot of marketing teams want to produce things like dummies books. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the thought of a dummies book bringing credibility to your team is much less likely than the thought of a dummies book reducing credibility to your team. I know it's about dumbing down the technologies, but at least a lot of the technologies that I work on require some level of simplicity, sure, and we want to make them easier and easier to use, but they're not dumb technologies. And anyway, that's just my little rant on that sponsored book campaigns that others do. Virtual meetups. So this is kind of the biggest thing that we did, and started this in, I'd say January. We started the planning process on this year, is doing virtual meetups. You know, there are, I think 600,000 members of physical meetups all around the world related to Spark, and related to some of the other technologies that we care a lot about, like Delta Lake and MLflow. And these people gather in physical rooms, but it's really hard as a developer relations team to support those communities. You know, we can hire a bunch of community managers to work with those thousands of meetup organizers that are resulting in those hundreds of thousands of meetups. But you know, that's a lot of work to work with all those communities. So we started to do virtual meetups, and we did virtual meetups because we wanted our scalability, or we needed scalability. We wanted to maintain our credibility, and that is enabled by our adaptability as a team. And so we started to do this, you know, just a month or two before the pandemic really hit. And so far this year, we've done 33 online meetups. They've been viewed over 100,000 times. And we did this sort of in a relaunched online meetup. So to talk a little bit about this, you know, you can see the meetup.com page. We purposely made it broad. We think the open source community is important. While we all want them to get educated on the Databricks brand, that's not our top priority. Our top priority is making them aware of the power of these different technologies, whether it be Delta Lake or MLflow or Koalas. And so we didn't heavily brand it with the Databricks brand. That helps us with credibility in the audience. You know, we are upfront, you know, that we're Databricks employees. You can see further down, you know, sponsored by Databricks and things like that. But we were able to grow the membership of this group so far 2.5 times this year, and grew our YouTube subscribership, where all these videos are posted, significantly as well. So that's about online meetups. You know, we've done this with Zoom as a technology, using Zoom webinars. That's probably the biggest area that we've have to improve, in my opinion. We want to have more interactivity. Right now, our interactivity is only over text. We want to have interactivity in video, but we also want to find a way to do that safely. All the Zoom bombing and stuff like that occurred earlier in the pandemic, we really don't want that. So thus far, we've kind of restricted some of that interactivity, and I'd love to expand that more. Also, as we speak about, like, what are our goals are wide awareness and wide adoption of this technology. So we don't want the video and other content just on third-party platforms. We don't want it just on Meetup. We don't want it just on YouTube. We actually want to publish the content on our website, which also helps from an SEO standpoint and makes other of our colleagues very happy. So we publish each of these meetups that belong in sort of a topical series. As a topical series on our website, we include video transcripts that have play icons to advance to a particular section in the talk, all sorts of things to improve the accessibility of this content and make it so people can access it directly through our website. One other thing that we've done in terms of trying to enable our team to work effectively during the pandemic is try to help. You know, technology in the data science, machine learning spaces are used a lot in the healthcare and life sciences world. It's used to do things like develop vaccines, et cetera. But how do we get the wider community involved here? We've done a lot of publishing of data. We took all the data a bunch of the open data sources that are out there, whether it be some of the original ones from China or, from South Korea, or ones developed by US universities. And we published those and made those available for easy analysis on Databricks. And then we've done a series of workshops to tell people through our online meetup how they can use these data sets to help understand the pandemic and share what they've learned, visualize it and such. We also did virtual hackathons. Again, this was set up, just prior to the pandemic starting. Basically, we were planning our hackathon for the Spark AI Summit as a physical event. And I said, you know what, it doesn't really make sense to have this hackathon just for a couple hours in the exhibit hall in a physical event. This is something we want the whole world to collaborate upon, and we want the world to be able to do it in their own time over a span of a month. And so we launched a virtual hackathon. Originally, the grand prizes involved flying out to the physical event. But those were later modified, and we really focused on donations to organizations that are helping, whether COVID or the environment or local issues. So this raised, I think, $35,000 or so for a variety of charities chosen by the winners. But all was done virtually, all through online communication. I'm actually getting close on time here, so I'm going to go very quickly over this topic that many of you are already familiar with, the idea of doing virtual events. I actually had my first foray into virtual events pre-COVID. Did a large online developer conference with 52 sessions at the end of 2019. And this was because the marketing team who ran the major conference that Neo4j does wanted to postpone the event by a couple months, and the DevRel team said, no, we don't want to wait to bring the community together. So we organized this event, got 52 sessions, and we had people from all over the world presenting: Australia, India, Dubai, Sweden, Germany, Brazil, 5 times the number of attendees of our physical events, and a content pipeline that drove web traffic for the next year. Post-COVID, we did the Spark and AI Summit online. This was a different scale of an event with 250 sessions, 5 times the number of sessions, but probably 8 times the number of attendees and things like that. Much more produced event. Our prior COVID event that I did with Neo4j, developer relations build all the infrastructure and put it all together, and we spent a grand total of about $7,000 on producing that event. The Spark and AI Summit, where the sessions were mostly recorded and not live, we spent many factors more than that $7,000 in order to produce such a widely popular event with highly edited content. So this was kind of the marketing polish that went on top of what would otherwise be a DevRel, much more kind of community-oriented event. So my advice for as you're dealing with DevRel in the COVID world is focus on scale, take advantage of your team's adaptability, and stay credible. Thanks very much. Wish you all a safe and happy rest of the week. And I think I still have a minute or two for questions here.
Everybody give a big round of applause to Ryan. All right. I think we have some time for some questions. So very quickly, if you have a question for Ryan, please shoot it in the chat and we will get through those in the few minutes we have. Let us know your burning questions. No one? Wow, you answered everybody's questions, Ryan?
It was osmosis, right? They They just pulled all the answers out of my brain, and
Wow.
frankly, that of my team. But
but let's
we'll
talk
see
about how,
all right.
Sorry, continue.
No, go.
Like, oh, sorry, there's a question. Have you seen interest in virtual user groups fade as Zoom fatigue kicks in? That's Zoom fatigue.
You know, I've been worried about that a lot. We haven't. We've actually seen our events grow and grow. I think that a lot of it is about, you know, we've started to get the community more and more involved as presenters. Initially, as we were kicking it off, it was much easier to grab the internal experts in the organization and have them present the topics for the meetups. But we started to expand that outwards, and we haven't seen it fade. We've actually seen people still quite engaged with that content. So I'm hoping that means that the software engineers who are our target audience are just not as dealing as much with Zoom fatigue and meetings in general as we are. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I'm hoping.
I think everyone deals with it in different ways, and I think it really does depend on the event and what value it's bringing. I mean, there are so many virtual events right now. People are still attending. They're just choosing the right ones for them. So it's making sure that event is
They're more selective. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we are out of time. I want to give you another round of applause. Thank you so much. If people want to connect with you outside of CMX Summit, how can they do that?
I just shared my Twitter handle in the chat here. So RyGuyRG on Twitter, and you can connect to me on LinkedIn. Either or works great.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'm sure I'll see you around the summit somewhere.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks. Bye.